time for the best coverage of the top stories in sports. The Sports Wrap with Jason Page starts now.
Indeed it does, and great to have you with us on this Monday edition of the show. We got a lot to do over the next 60 minutes. I mean, I don't know where we're fitting it all in. Robert Littal will join us to finish the show. Black Sports Online founder. He was at the Canelo Crawford Netflix extravaganza at Allegiant Stadium. 70,000 of his closest friends on Saturday night. We'll get his thoughts on that fight, what that fight means for the future of them, the future of boxing, all of that still to come in the show. Brian Twining, Bleacher Nation on NASCAR. What was one of the most thrilling races we've had in a long time over in Bristol, with Christopher Bell getting the win. Our friend Bill Bender drops by the show to talk college football as well. Sam Yarnell is the day off, so you just get me. And we got to talk about what happened with Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is injured again. And if you are the Cincinnati Bengals, you have to be asking yourself, what do we do for at least the next 12 weeks? The news coming out on Monday morning that Joe Burrow will be out at least 12 weeks as they have surgery to repair a turf toe injury. And this is the sort of injury that can linger. So 12 weeks is being extremely optimistic right now if you're the Cincinnati Bengals. And yes, you have Jake Browning. And yes, he is familiar with the offense. And yes, you can win games with Jake Browning as your starting quarterback. But the question is twofold here. One, can you win enough games with Jake Browning as your starting quarterback to make the playoffs? And then two, even if you win enough games to make the playoffs with Jake Browning, will you have Joe Burrow back this season? You know, the most optimistic timetable is mid-December. Can you afford to just throw away a season in which you went and signed Trey Hendrickson and figured out his contract situation? You brought back Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, and you've got all these offensive weapons, one of the most prolific offenses in the NFL. You're just going to hand that to Jake Browning and say that's our plan for the rest of the season? Is that palatable to the fan base? Is that palatable to ownership? Is that palatable to Zach Taylor? I am not hearing enough people talking about this team making a trade for a quarterback with bigger upside to Jake Browning. I think we know at this point what the upside to Jake Browning is. He's okay. And again, with the amount of talent around him, you can win games with Jake Browning. With the talent around him, because I say it all the time, there are two types of quarterbacks in this league. There are quarterbacks who are good enough that if you put the right players around them, it elevates their game. And then there's quarterbacks that are good enough to elevate the games of an average team around them. Jake Browning is the former rather than the latter. Can you make a deal? If it's Jameis Winston, if it's Kirk Cousins, is there a deal to be made if you are the Cincinnati Bengals to try and upgrade at the quarterback position with a guy that may have a little downside but may have a little upside? You're not looking to supplant. You're not looking to supplant Joe Burrow. You're not bringing in the replacement for him. You're just bringing in somebody who's a placeholder for him. And I know that's tricky in the case of a guy like Kirk Cousins because he makes so much money. And what are you going to do with him when the event that, you know, we all know is going to happen does happen, and that is a return at some point of Joe Burrow? But Jameis Winston, that to me, again, we know the highs and lows of Jameis Winston and everything that comes with him. But Jameis Winston as a potential option for this team, Jameis Winston is a guy that could potentially get in there and still help you win enough games? Because I don't even know if they make the postseason with Jake Browning. I mean, think about, look at this Bengals schedule here the rest of the way. And you find me, because the AFC is going to be highly competitive. They play in a tough division where there's no easy wins. I mean, there's the rest of the schedule for the Cincinnati Bengals. And that's where it starts to the conversation. It's nice that they're 2-0. I think like 60% of NFL teams make the playoffs when they start 2-0. They didn't lose Joe Burrow, those teams. They get the Vikings next. Then they're at the Broncos. Both those games on the road. Home for the Lions. At the Packers. Home for the Steelers. I mean, that is a beast. The Jets are not going to be a pushover. Home for the Bears. At the Steelers. Patriots, Ravens, Bills, Ravens, Dolphins, Cardinals, Browns. The saving grace for them is their final 3 games. Home for the Cardinals, home for the Browns, at the Dolphins. Those are all going to be winnable games for them. And maybe at that point you have Joe Burrow back. So if you've got 7 or 8 wins at that point in the season, are there? But again, are there 5 or 6 wins with Jake Browning at quarterback when you go through the schedule I just talked about? Vikings, Broncos, Lions, Packers, Steelers, Jets, Bears, Steelers. I mean, that is a beast of a schedule. And you still got the Ravens 2 more times. And you still got the Steelers 2 more times. Very difficult decisions. And look, yet again, we're talking about a season cut short by injury for Joe Burrow, who may just wind up being one of those guys in this league. One of those guys that is one of the fantastic quarterbacks in the league, one of the great players in the league that just finds a way to get hurt, that is snake bitten almost every season. And we're going to be cheated because we're not going to get to see the best of him and what he could have been. And how does that affect the morale of this Bengals team? In the immediate yesterday, you rally the troops. You don't know how serious the injury is, if he's going to be out 3 months at that point. You don't know if you're the team. So getting through it yesterday against a Jaguars team that's you can do that. I mean, Jake Browning threw 3 interceptions yesterday, and here's the problem with this. He is turnover prone, and this is the problem. With a defense like the Bengals that is going to struggle to keep teams out of the end zone, you cannot constantly give up a short field. You cannot constantly make it easier on other teams. Give them extra possessions. And Jake Browning, with 3 interceptions yesterday, he did that. He put that defense that already, as we know, is not a great defense. He put them in a position where they almost lost the game. But they didn't, and the Bengals are 2-0. That's the upside. Top of the division. But they're going to be doing it with Jake Browning for the foreseeable future. We got more to get to from around the league yesterday. We don't even have enough time to get to all the great games. But we'll do our best, and we'll do it next. All right, coming up in 10 minutes, we got you covered for college football. A weekend of coaching firings. Tennessee and Georgia played a banger. Brian Kelly was in a bad mood even though his team beat Florida. Notre Dame is in trouble. But could they still make the playoffs is the question, because they're Notre Dame. Bill Bender, the Sporting News, will join us coming up to talk about all of that and more. But more to talk about from the NFL. And again, if we don't get to a game that you watch tomorrow's show, we will have all your Tuesday leftovers talking about what transpired, because it was a wild game, wild weekend of games in the NFL. So we'll obviously get to all of it on tomorrow's show. Let's go around the league and talk about a few of the highlights. And look, the Cowboys and Giants, who for like the first time in 20 years weren't on in prime time or in like one of the NFL's marquee spots on the schedule in terms of the time of the game. It was one of the early games. Delivered probably the most thrilling game of the NFL season. What do you have? 5 lead changes in the fourth quarter. And Russell Wilson plays, one of the best games of his career from a statistical standpoint. And the Giants still figure out a way to lose. They still figured out a way. I put this out on social media yesterday, and I'll say it again. If you're the Giants and you can't win that game yesterday, what game can you win? What game can you win? And does it even matter how good Russell Wilson plays? Because you see there is this anxiousness to get Jackson Dart into the game. They were playing him. They were alternating snaps at one point, it felt like, in the fourth quarter of this game, where they'd bring in Jackson Dart and he's handing off the football for somebody to run it. Why? What? Brian Daboll wants more FaceTime on the sidelines with Russell Wilson? Like, what are you doing? The Cowboys' defense is garbage. That's the big takeaway from that game. Outside of the fact that the Giants aren't going to win many games this year, despite the fact that Malik Neighbors is really special. The Cowboys, boy, they sold out on the run yesterday, but they didn't sell out when it came to defending the passing game because Russell Wilson was able to throw it around to anybody he wanted to. Sure, the Giants only ran it for 84 yards, but they threw it for 450. And don't forget Dak Prescott, who played well in this game too. So the Cowboys get their first win. They're 1-1. The Cowboys are exactly. I'm going to sound like Dennis Green back in the. You want to crown them? Crown them. The Cowboys are exactly who we thought they would be through 2 weeks. They are Timu Cincinnati Bengals. If Joe Burrow was still on the Bengals, they are the Timu version of the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to score a ton of points. They're going to give up a lot of points. That's how they're going to try to win games. They're going to sell out on the run. They're going to dare you to beat them in the passing game. And as the Giants proved yesterday, you can beat them in the passing game. So there was that game, which obviously caught a lot of eyeballs and a lot of attention. What's going on with the Dolphins right now is going to become a bigger story. I don't know how Mike McDaniel survives what's going on with that team right now, because they are in big trouble at 0-2 after losing at home to the Patriots yesterday. And I know some people want to say this is as much about the Patriots and Drake May and this team's on the come. But Miami yesterday, this was a poor performance at home, giving up 33 in your stadium against the New England Patriots. And it was nice to see Tyreek Hill, if you're a Dolphins fan, do some things, 6 for 109 in this game. But again, where is the sense of urgency now for a Dolphins team that's 0-2 after losses to the Colts and Patriots, and they get the Bills next week? Well, this week, on Thursday night. They could be 0-3 before we even get to my birthday, which is September 20th, by the way, for those looking to send gifts. Then they got the Jets and Panthers, which will be winnable games. But the Jets are not going to be a pushover for anybody. And, we saw the Panthers yesterday competitive in Arizona against a Cardinals team that's now 2-0, by the way. Leaders in the NFC West. San Francisco figured out a way to win again. I thought that was a potential spot for them where they could lose. They get a win yesterday behind Mac Jones. Just trying to steal wins until you can get Brock Purdy back. And who knows when George Kittle comes back, because we know how hamstrings can be. How about the wild finish in Indianapolis with the Colts and the Broncos? Indianapolis is 2-0, by the way, for the first time in eons. And the reason they're 2-0, on a 60-yard field goal attempt, you get a player on Denver who tries to get leverage, hits the player, his teammate in front of him, makes contact with him. They throw a 15-yard penalty. It turns a 60-yard game-winning field goal attempt into a 45-yard field goal attempt. And what happens? You get a win. You get a win for Indianapolis in the most unlikely way, and Sean Payton's got to be losing his ever-loving mind this morning after that. I mean, what a way to lose a football game. You just watched the Kansas City Chiefs lose to Philadelphia. And by the way, it's time to worry about Kansas City. It's time to worry about this team being able to score enough points on a week-in, week-out basis. We all said you have to give them the benefit of the doubt. You got to pick them until they finally show they are no longer worthy of being picked. Well, right now, through 2 games, they are not worthy of being picked. And here's the reality of all of this. All great runs come to an end. Doesn't mean Patrick Mahomes will never win another Super Bowl. Doesn't mean Andy Reid will never win another Super Bowl. But what it means is this iteration of the Kansas City Chiefs may not be capable of winning a Super Bowl. We have to acknowledge that at 0-2. And Philadelphia busted out the same playbook from the Super Bowl. And if in a revenge game for Kansas City, and we could say whatever we want, this game meant more to Kansas City than it meant to Philadelphia. And for them to come out in that game and only score 17 points at home, and now be staring at 0-2 in that AFC West. And if you're teams like the Raiders and teams like the Chargers and teams like the Broncos, you've got to smell the chum in the water right now. This division can be had, which is why that loss for the Broncos is even more perplexing. We'll go from the NFL to college football. Bill Bender of the Sporting News joins us in just a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. All right, we got plenty more football to talk about in this show. We got through the NFL part of it. We could do the whole show on the NFL, but that wouldn't be fair to college football. And this guy, Bill Bender from the Sporting News, who joins us every Monday on the show to talk about the top stories in college football. I got alerts on my phone saying coaches were fired. And Bill, I was like, oh, Chris Kleiman. The Reaper finally came for Chris Kleiman. Well, apparently that wasn't the case. It was everybody but Chris Kleiman that got fired, including over at UCLA, Deshaun Foster getting fired, and the Hokies at Virginia Tech getting rid of Brent Pry. So I asked the question from this standpoint. I was thinking about this last night as I was preparing the show. Do you think now with NIL and all the money that's being poured into the sport, not just the money that coaches are getting, but now the money that players are getting, that with the pressures being even higher and being ratcheted up more, that we're going to see a lot more of these earlier season coaching firings, guys getting a shorter leash?
I thought it would be the other way around.
Really?
After last year, because we didn't have a lot of Power 4 changes. You know, Rich Rodriguez and Scott Frost and Bill Belichick. It wasn't a lot. And now we're back to what we normally see is a couple, like, I would say quick. I know UCLA, it makes sense. I mean, you can't lose to UNLV in New Mexico, not the way that they did, not with a 5-star quarterback, and not expect consequences, even for a running back who's only a former running back at the program that's only been there for 15 games. Virginia Tech, the Shane Beamer thing's going to come up this week and next week and the week after because they just haven't found the right fit since Frank Beamer left.
Chris Kleiman. Let's talk about Chris Kleiman because they lost again this weekend to Arizona. I mean, what if those guys are losing their jobs? What has to happen for Chris Kleiman to lose his at this point? Not that I'm rooting. I'm not rooting for anybody to get fired here. I don't have a horse in this race. But at the same time, I mean, at some point, they've got to be thinking about a change of some sort at Kansas State, don't they?
No, you're just sadistic. No, I'm kidding. He'll ask for the Dublin disclaimer. Like, we went over to Ireland in a highly anticipated game and lost, and our season went off the rails, and we'll see if they can get it together in the second half. It's exactly what happened to Florida State last year, and other teams have experienced that. But, yeah, if you would have said, hey, 2 coaches get fired Sunday morning, I would have got Deshaun Foster right, I think. I don't know if I would have got Brent Pry, because I probably would have said Chris Kleiman after this disastrous start with the talent that they had at Kansas State, a Big 12 championship contender where it's definitely gone wrong.
LSU wins again, but Brian Kelly's still not happy, and he's not happy because he's getting questions that he doesn't think are fair. And he wants to sort of, he's one of these guys that wants to dictate, I guess, what you can and cannot be asked in a post-game press conference. The example of that is right here. We'll let people see it, and then we'll let you comment on the other side.
Immediate post-game sessions, but What are you seeing with your offense?
Stop. Really? Is that the first question? We won the game 20-10. Try another question. What do you want me to tell you? I just laid it out for you. We played the game to win the game. We played the game to win the game.
All right. How about third down then? What is going on with third down?
It's one game. Last game, we were great on third down. You're looking at this from the wrong perspective. LSU won the football game. Won the game. I don't know what you want from me. What do you want? You want us to win 70-0 against Florida to keep you happy?
No, I think people want to know why you can't run the ball, quite honestly.
We can run the ball. Did you see the last play of the game? That's all you need. You just need one. There's a ridiculous questions. And I'm getting tired of it. That football team just worked their tail off to get an SEC win, and you want to know what's wrong. You know what? You're spoiled. You're spoiled. This team is 17-1 at night. 17-1. Give them some respect. How about that? Give them some respect instead of micro-analyzing every little thing. This is ridiculous. For a group of seasoned reporters, that kind of question is so out of line.
All right, Bill, is he right?
I think he's living out the dream of most FBS coaches. They would love to be able to say that to reporters, I think, especially after a win against Florida. And, the questions have to be asked. We have to be critical. I understand that. But, Brian Kelly, if we're going to be critical, then coaches can be critical right back. And, he would have played off well in the 80s and 90s with his style. There's no doubt in my mind. And I think he's a hyper successful coach that probably gets more criticism than credit than what he deserves. He's right. That was a big win. And, all we care about are the wins and losses. They do need to run the ball more effectively if they want to be a national championship team. They're good enough to make the playoff with what they have now with that defense. But, it's a fair question. Maybe ask that one later in the press conference. But as I've been joking all day, if you're a South Carolina reporter today, you got to ask Shane Beamer about Virginia Tech right off the go just to get it out of the way.
And the thing is, you look at their schedule. They get Southeast Louisiana, and then they've got 4 games out of 5 that are against ranked opponents, top 20 teams as of right now. I can understand why Brian Kelly would be a little ornery.
Yeah, we're obsessed with Brian Kelly, though, a little too much, I think. And it dates back all the way back to the purple-faced moment when he was at Notre Dame. We love Brian Kelly meltdowns. It's like that. I didn't watch the show, but I've seen enough of the clips. Like, what's the guy's name in Entourage that always goes off?
I know who you're talking about.
Ari, maybe? Is it Ari?
Yes.
I think people watch that show to watch him have meltdowns, much like we watch LSU press conferences to watch BK have meltdowns. And I admit it. I've never seen Entourage. I don't know if that increases or decreases my value in your opinion. I'm not sure, Jason.
It's like hoping the Mets lose, so you see Frank Fleming losing his mind from Barstool, about the fact the Mets just lost again. All right, so we've got through all the coaching stuff, but there is more to talk about from college football. There were actually games to talk about. I want to know from Bill, so I'm preparing you in advance. You'll have 3 minutes during the break to think about it. The 0-2 teams at greatest risk and the 0-2 teams that you could still see bouncing back and salvaging the season and maybe even being a playoff team. We're going to talk about that with Bill Bender as we continue on this Monday edition of Sports Wrap. Lots of football on the show. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to this Monday edition of Sports Wrap. Coming up in 10 minutes, our friend Brian Twining from Bleacher Nation on NASCAR. What had to be the most thrilling NASCAR race I have watched since I really started getting into the sport over the last couple of years. What a race. Cars on fire, guys getting smoked out of their cars. It was crazy. We'll talk about Christopher Bell's win over in Bristol. But we continue the conversation on college football with our friend Bill Bender, who does a great job with the sporting news, hanging out with us on the program. So we've got a bunch of 2-loss teams that I don't know if we necessarily expected to have 2 losses at this stage of the season. One of them is obviously Notre Dame, who loses to Texas A&M. And the Irish are look, while they're in a lot of trouble, I still see pundits out there who think they could still be a playoff team, even with these 2 losses. When you look at their schedule, what remains, the rest of the landscape in college football, just as far as Notre Dame is concerned, and we'll get to the rest of these 2-loss teams that are at risk. As far as Notre Dame is concerned, is there still a path for them to the playoffs in your mind?
The knee-jerk reaction for me was no, and I think it's going to be very difficult because of what's left on the schedule. But the more I've kind of thought about it, 10-2, as long as you have 2 losses or less, you have a chance. The SEC teams are going to cannibalize each other, and there are a ton of them. The Big Ten teams are probably going to cannibalize each other a little bit, except for that top 3. I feel pretty good about Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. They need USC to go on a little run here. That would help. They need Navy to go on a run, as strange as that sounds, and they need one of those ACC teams on their schedule to get hot. But there is enough. But man, these are bad losses because they are a very flawed team right now. They let that one get away with the missed extra point, botched extra point, whatever you want to call it. And I just think it's going to be tough. I don't know. I guess they could, but I don't know that they're going to go 10-0 the rest of the way.
Clemson at 1-2 after the loss to Georgia Tech.
Now, the weird part is I think they're worse than Notre Dame, but they have a path back because they're in a conference. That's the other part of this equation. If Notre Dame was in the ACC and had 1 conference loss to Miami and lost to A&M and then went on a run, it'd be a playoff team. I mean, Clemson made the playoff with 3 losses last year. They are rough, though, for what we thought they were going to be. Cade Klubnik's been erratic. They let Georgia Tech out-tough them and go get that field goal at the end of the game. There's still a lot of good pieces at Clemson, but this doesn't feel like one of his national championship caliber teams, which I honestly thought they would be. It feels more like a maybe get into the playoff and get beat in the first round kind of team, which is what they were last year.
How do you figure what's happened with Cade Klubnik and the way he's struggled? Is there one thing you can attribute it to?
Just inaccuracy. I overuse this phrase all the time, but I think in life, and with quarterbacks, especially with my kids, I emphasize being efficient. Don't turn your bedroom light off. Don't go up there twice when you only have to go up once. And that's hard to teach with kids, by the way. But with quarterbacks, being efficient, getting the ball out on time, being accurate on throws that should be accurate, responding to pressure. And Cade Klubnik's, I remember reading a headline in the summer that he was a generational quarterback. I think Cade Klubnik will be a solid NFL quarterback at some point, but are you starting a franchise with him? Are you really starting a franchise with any of these guys so far this year? I mean, I don't know. You would have to, at this point, we're trying to retalk ourselves into Carson Beck with the way he's playing.
Not that we were looking at them as a playoff team this year, but a thought on Colorado now at 1-2. And you had, Dion, who was upset last week about the reporting from Pete Thamel that was out there about who the starting quarterback was going to be. And then turned out Pete Thamel was right about who the starting quarterback was going to be. But now Colorado at 1-2, and what could really be a long season in Boulder.
I think it's going to be. And, if Dion wants to chew anybody out, he should chew the person out that leaked that to Pete, probably, yeah. Right? Like you've got some leaks in your building if you were trying to keep something secret. Plus Pete's an excellent reporter. So there you go. And you're right. I think it's going to get a lot worse in Boulder. That was a, eye-opener with Houston. And obviously in the Big 12, you can't take any game for granted in that conference. And especially when you're playing musical chairs at quarterback. Dion, when he starts sniping at the media, it could go either way.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes it works.
That
sometimes
shtick works
it doesn't.
when you're winning. It doesn't work when you're losing. That's the bottom line to me. Save the best for last. Tennessee Georgia. What a fantastic game it was. But yet again, Tennessee finds a way to lose this game.
Imagine what our entire first segment today would have been about whether or not Georgia's empire is crumbling if that guy makes the field goal. I mean, because Tennessee came out swinging, great start. Joey Aguilar played well. They responded when Georgia responded and tried to bully them out of the stadium, and they just missed the field goal. It's got to be just
you're gutted.
painful.
You're gutted for Max Gilbert. You're gutted,
right? For sure. And I think, but Tennessee can bounce back. And to me, give Kirby some credit. I am, pumping up Brian Kelly and Kirby smart. What a limb I'm out on today. But Kirby didn't panic. He called timeouts at the right time. They win the game in overtime with the formula we've seen: a sweep and 2 runs up the middle. Kirby knows how to win, and that was a reminder that, Georgia, I don't know if they're a national championship team, but I know they're going to have something to say about it when we get to November.
And Gunnar Stockton. We talk about the different quarterbacks in the game and, the Arch Mannings of the world and the Cade Klubniks. Gunnar Stockton, 23 of 31, 304, and 2 touchdowns.
And the clutch throw of the year, on fourth down with the touchdown to London Humphreys. Yeah. So Kirby does well with those guys that are going to be second-string NFL QBs.
Bill Bender, the Sporting News, does a great job on college football. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. Coming up in 10 minutes, special edition of Odds and Ends. Robert Littal will join us to break down what happened in the big, highly anticipated matchup between Canelo Alvarez and Terence Crawford. So all of that coming up for you in about 10 minutes. Talk about that fight, implications for going forward for both fighters, the big Netflix extravaganza. Our good friend Brian Twining is with us, as he is every Monday on the show. Our wraparound NASCAR segments on Friday and Monday. And boy, I mean, I've only been like knee deep into NASCAR for maybe now, this is my second full year of really getting into it. But if that race in Bristol wasn't the damnedest thing I have ever seen since I started watching NASCAR, Brian, wrecks, fires, people getting smoked out of their cars, tires wearing out. They looked like the tires on my Lincoln Continental 20 years ago when I forgot to change the tires and literally the rubber was just flying off it. Give me a sense. I mean, you watch NASCAR probably more than I have, and give me a sense for just how crazy what we saw with Christopher Bell obviously getting the win on Saturday night.
Well, it was quite crazy considering what we saw in practice was a complete lack of tire fall off. And then all of a sudden it goes the complete opposite direction, and where guys were running 20, 25 laps and then complaining about cording. So it threw the race for the loop. The drivers did not know to expect this. So obviously strategies got thrown out the window. And as you said, because of all the rubber getting thrown on the track, you had multiple cars actually have fires in their right front wheel well. Honestly, for me, it was one of the most enjoyable races I've seen all season, and I'm still upset that they released an extra set of tires. They came into the weekend expecting the tires to only go 40 or so laps, and so they gave them an allotment of 11 fresh sets, expecting that. So why do we then give them an extra set during the race? It made no sense.
You know how I feel about it. I was texting you as I am wont to do when I watch NASCAR. I texted Brian. I said, this would be the equivalent of the NBA saying in the middle of a game, you know what? We're going to make the game 5 quarters today instead of 4. Yep. Like, it's halftime. You know what? Let's add an extra quarter. Why not? Everybody gets the extra quarter. It's fine. I'm just like, this is what NASCAR does, really?
Yeah, it kind of, I don't want to say it ruined the strategy at the end, but there were a couple of guys who were pitting based on the initial amount of tires that they were given about halfway through the race. So obviously it kind of screwed their strategies up. So obviously that beside the fact, the race was incredible. I still wish we wouldn't have had that late caution, because I was very excited to see if Carson Hocevar and Alex Bowman could have run down Brad Keselowski at the end there. So
we have Christopher Bell winning. We've got our final 12 set for New Hampshire next weekend. But talk a little bit about, who missed out here. And obviously Shane Van Gisbergen, who we had talked about all season long, the road course specialist, the road warrior, came up short. We all knew he kind of would. This track really wasn't suited for him. What is the big takeaway from him at the end of the season where you win 4 times, but you're out after the first round of the playoffs?
I think it's still important to remember he's still a newbie to the Cup Series. And I mean, he's still technically learning the car, and he's had fewer races in this car and on ovals than most of these guys do by the time they even get a real license with the way that they grow up driving on ovals. So, I mean, obviously it's a disappointment that, as you said, a guy wins 4 races and he doesn't advance in the playoffs, but we got to give him some time. I do think he's getting better. He's improving on some of these tracks. So next year, I think you'll see another step forward for that team.
You got to feel for Alex Bowman. He needed the win in order to get in, but obviously comes up short here. But still, I mean, he represented himself well in this race. He really did.
Yeah, this is probably one of, if not his best tracks on the schedule. So it wasn't a surprise to me to see him mixing it up front, despite not practicing very well or qualifying where he thought he was going to. But as you said, I think they can take away some positives here as they look forward to the rest of the season. It sucks not advancing in the playoffs, but then they just move forward and try to still win races and then look forward to the beginning of 2026.
As we look ahead to the second round, Joey Logano, you could just see everybody hanging on for dear life at the end of that race to make sure they got in. Tyler Reddick, having to hang on for dear life to get in. As you look ahead to New Hampshire and sort of where we go from here, is it just a matter of, hey, survive in advance, keep yourself in the mix, and if you do that, any of these drivers could still wind up taking this thing?
Yeah, I do think you're going to see some of the guys near the bottom of the standings right now or below the cut line be a little bit safer here in New Hampshire with Kansas coming up, a track that a lot of these dudes are very good at, and they're going to bring a lot more speed. And a guy like Logano, not shocking whatsoever that despite him having a terrible history at Bristol, he figures out a way to strategize his way into a finish that gets him into the next round.
Real quick here, Christopher Bell had the 3 wins in a row, and then we didn't kind of hear from him the rest of the season. What does it say about him, at this stage of the season in the postseason, getting this win and what it means for him moving forward?
Well, I got to eat a little crow because I didn't believe him after his comment last week saying he was the best car and he finished 7th. He was tired of that bleep. Clearly, he was really good at Bristol. Should he have won? Probably not. But now we head to the track where he's a decided favorite before we even see the cars hit the track for practice and qualifying. So I do think he's reemerged as somebody to be a contender for the championship.
By the way, kudos to Zane Smith, a 3rd place finish at Bristol as well.
Yes.
He was in the mix late in that race. Somebody you don't hear a lot about throughout the season. Our friend Brian Twining, Bleacher Nation. He does a great job on NASCAR there, also on the football. You can check him out with fantasy stuff as well. Always appreciate you, my friend. Be well.
Yep. Thanks, Jason.
We're coming back. All right, just about time to say goodbye on this Monday edition of the show. Before we do, a quick reminder, make sure to subscribe to the podcast version of Sports Wrap with Jason Page. Also, check out our YouTube channel, Sports Wrap with Jason Page YouTube channel. Sports Wrap shorts are there and a whole bunch more. A special guest joins us in what would typically be odds and ends. Our friend Robert Lital, the founder of Black Sports Online, who we have him on the show every Friday. But if you heard us on Friday, we were talking about this Terence Crawford, Canelo Alvarez fight over on Netflix. Well, Robert was there. Robert, of course, the founder of Black Sports Online, was at the fight here in Las Vegas, where we are. And Allegiant Stadium, record crowd, 70,000 people. A great night for boxing. Before we get to the fight, Robert, real quick here, a great night for boxing.
Yeah, I mean, great atmosphere. It was packed. And they were loud. So it was one of those where you got chills when you saw the fighters kind of come out into the ring, and it kind of reminded people why boxing at a certain time was, one of the number one sports in the U.S., because there's nothing that really gets you going, that really has that type of atmosphere than a big fight right before that bell rings.
Yeah. Terence Bud Crawford defeats Canelo Alvarez 116, 112 on one card, 115, 113 on the other cards. I had it 115, 113, despite the fact that people were giving me hate on social media throughout the fight for the way I was scoring it. I thought Crawford actually needed those final couple of rounds to seal this victory.
Well, I think what happens is when someone is such a big underdog and someone is coming up 2 weight classes, I think you give a little extra credit when those rounds are close. And there was a couple of rounds, where Terence Crawford wasn't doing much, but neither was, Canelo. But Canelo was the aggressor in the fight. He was kind of trying to walk, Terence Crawford down. So I think it was a closer fight than a lot of people thought, simply because they were kind of just surprised at how Crawford was able to kind of maneuver through the fight without actually really ever getting hit, truly flush and truly clean. I mean, it was a boxing clinic from him. He fought exactly how he needed to fight to win it, which was to move, stick and move, hit and not be hit. And Canelo kind of showed his age without being able to cut off the ring and kind of ever figure out the puzzle that was Terence Crawford.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Crawford was doing a lot of his damage in counterpunching. When Canelo would come in and try to do his damage, for every 1 or 2 shots that Canelo was getting off, Crawford was getting off 3. That's sort of what it felt like to me watching the fight, as somebody who doesn't watch boxing on a week in, week out basis, but obviously knows the sport pretty well. This now gets into an interesting conversation, though, with Crawford, who's never lost. He's 37, almost 38. There's a lot of conversations about what the future holds for him. I don't get the sense Canelo Alvarez is ready to retire, by the way. I think he's going to keep fighting. But for Crawford, who's won at all these weight classes, he's undefeated. A lot of comparisons, a lot of people saying, if we're talking about the best fighter of the last 30 years, is it him or Floyd? I'll ask you, as somebody who said, I've seen a couple of Floyd fights in person. You've probably seen more of them than I have. Floyd or Crawford?
Well, the major difference between Floyd Mayweather and Terence Crawford is Floyd Mayweather fought all of his contemporaries during this era. Even if Manny Pacquiao was a little,
I was going to say that was the end. That was the end of Pacquiao.
But people don't understand. Shane Mosley, Cotto, Canelo,
Oscar.
He fought all of Oscar. Yeah. He fought all of these guys, during the time that they were still pretty active, fighters. Whereas Terence Crawford, he never got to fight Keith Thurman. He didn't fight Earl Spence in his prime. He didn't fight Sean Porter until Sean was ready to retire. He didn't fight Danny Garcia. He didn't get the Manny Pacquiao fight. So in Terence Crawford's prime, he didn't really get to fight his contemporaries, and he would probably beat them all badly. But because he didn't, and his 2 main, victories are on the backside of his career, it would have been a hell of a fight, between them. But I still give Floyd the edge, and as far as the best fighter, I would say, over the last, 30 years. You have to put Usyk in that conversation as well.
Do you get the sense Crawford will fight again? Is there a fight out there that makes sense for him?
If it's enough money. Yeah, I think at this point it's about money. I mean, he was not an active fighter before. He fought maybe once every year and a half. So I don't think you're going to see him anytime soon. But if a year comes by, year and a half, and they say, "Oh, you want to fight David Benavidez at 168 or some other guy that is coming up or coming down, and we'll give you $50 million and put it on Netflix." The turkey seems to have unlimited money. I can see him, doing that. But really, there's really not much for him to prove anymore. I think this was his legacy win, and if he wanted to just kind of do a George Costanza and leave while on top, leave while he's ahead, this would be the perfect time to do it.
In the last 30 seconds here, and I know it probably deserves more than that, so I apologize in advance. The passing of Ricky Hatton, who is who passes away at the age of 46, meant so much to this sport, and the outpouring of support that we've seen from people online tells you just how beloved a figure he was.
Oh man, he was a great guy, and I'll be honest with you. When it comes to Americans understanding, UK boxing and putting UK boxing on the map, he was the guy that came to America and became a star, not just in the UK, but beloved in America as well. Even though he lost the fights between Floyd Mayweather and Manny Pacquiao, I think he came out of those fights more popular and more beloved than even if he would have won the fights, and that tells you about something that when someone can lose and everybody on both sides, even if you were a fan of Floyd or Manny, was like, this is my guy. I'm going to follow him. I like him. He's a genuine guy. He had that type of, when you met him, that type of feel to him.
Robert Littal, thank you. I appreciate you. Hopefully I get to see you while you're out here today. Enjoy the rest of your day. All right. We got to go. That does it for this edition of Sports Wrap. Thanks to our guests. We'll see you all back here tomorrow.